The village woke early for Amara's wedding, but excitement quickly turned into gossip. Nobody understood why the chief's educated daughter had chosen to marry Daniel, a quiet farmer with worn clothes and rough ends. Women whispered near the roadside while men laughed beneath mango trees. She could have married a wealthy man, one woman said softly. Instead, she chose poverty. Inside her father's home, Amara stood silently while older women prepared her dress. She heard every whisper drifting through the windows, but she ignored them. Daniel had given her something richer than status. He had given her peace. Across the village, Daniel adjusted his old black suit beside his elderly mother. The fabric was faded from age, and his shoes carried cracks from years in the fields. Hold your head high, his mother whispered gently. Daniel nodded, though he already knew humiliation awaited him. At the church courtyard, the mockery became louder. Guests stared openly at his appearance, while a wealthy businessman named Victor approached with a mocking smile. Victor had once tried to marry Amara himself, and rejection had filled him with bitterness. You look nervous, farmer, Victor said loudly. Marriage is expensive. Laughter spread through the crowd. Daniel stayed silent and walked inside the church. The ceremony itself was calm, but tension lingered in every corner. During the vows, Daniel looked directly at Amara. I cannot promise riches, he said quietly, but I promise loyalty. Amara smiled through tears. I choose your heart, she answered. Some guests exchanged skeptical looks while Victor watched coldly from the back. The reception outside quickly became uncomfortable. Guests whispered constantly about Daniel's poverty. Finally, Victor stood and raised a glass. To the bride and her farmer husband, he announced mockingly, May love survive hard times. Cruel laughter echoed beneath the tents. Daniel slowly stood from his chair. Money does not make a man valuable, he said calmly. Character does. Before Victor could answer, the sound of engines suddenly rolled across the distant road. Guests turned toward the village entrance as black SUVs emerged through clouds of dust. One after another, 12 vehicles approached the wedding in perfect formation. Silence swallowed the celebration. Men in dark suits stepped out carefully before an older man emerged from the center SUV. Chief Adewal's face turned pale immediately. The stranger walked directly toward Daniel, while the entire village watched in confusion. Then he bowed his head respectfully before the poor farmer. Sir, he said, we have been searching for you for a very long time. The crowd froze in complete silence after the stranger bowed before Daniel. Even Victor looked stunned. Nobody could understand why wealthy men arriving in 12 black SUVs would show respect to a poor farmer. The older man slowly lifted his head and spoke again. We searched across 3 countries for you after your father disappeared. Murmurs spread instantly through the gates. Daniel's expression hardened slightly. This is not a place, he said quietly, but the old man shook his head. You stayed hidden long enough. Chief Adewale stepped forward carefully, confusion all over his face. Daniel, who are these people? Before Daniel could answer, Victor laughed nervously. This has to be some joke. The old man turned toward him coldly. The only joke here is how you treated this man. The reception fell silent again. Then the stranger revealed the truth. Years earlier, Daniel's father had owned one of the largest agricultural companies in the region before enemies destroyed the family through corruption and violence. After his parents died, Daniel disappeared and chose a quiet life far away from power and money. He walked away from wealth, the old man explained. Not because he lost it, because he was tired of what it turned people into. Guests stared at Daniel in disbelief. Victor's confidence vanished completely. Amara looked at her husband with quiet emotion, finally understanding the sadness she had always seen hidden behind his eyes. Daniel looked around at the crowd that had mocked him all day. Now you know, he said calmly, and yet I am still the same man you insulted an hour ago. Nobody could meet his eyes after that. Victor tried to recover his confidence. forcing a weak smile onto his face. If you were truly wealthy, he said carefully, why hide as a farmer? Danielle looked at him quietly. Because money reveals people's real character. The words landed heavily across the reception. Several guests lowered their heads in shame. Danielle's mother sat silently near the table, tears gathering in her eyes as she watched the same people who mocked her son suddenly treat him with respect. The older man opened a black folder and handed it to Daniel. Inside were documents connected to his family's old company and properties. Everything belongs to you now, the man said. Victor stared at the papers in disbelief while Amara remained calm beside her husband. She had married him before any of this was revealed, and everyone knew it. That truth suddenly became impossible to ignore. Danielle slowly closed the folder. I did not come here to impress anyone, he said. I came here to marry the woman I love. The silence that followed felt heavier than all the laughter from earlier that day. Rain finally began falling over the village, soft at first, then heavier against the reception tents. Most guests remained frozen in place, still struggling to accept what they had witnessed. Victor quietly stepped backward, hoping to disappear into the crowd, but Daniel stopped him with a single glance. Do not leave now, he said calmly. You were very confident earlier. A few guests looked away awkwardly. Victor forced a laugh, though fear had already replaced his arrogance. I was only joking. Daniel nodded slowly. Humiliation always sounds like a joke to the person causing it. The words struck harder than shouting ever could. Chief Adewale finally approached his son-in-law with new eyes. Why did you never tell us the truth? He asked quietly. Daniel looked toward the rain beyond the tents. Because I wanted one person to love me without seeing money first. Beside him, Amara reached for his hand again, and this time the entire village understood why she had chosen him. The atmosphere of the wedding changed completely. The same guests who once mocked Daniel now rushed to greet him politely. Some offered forced smiles, while others suddenly praised his humility. Daniel noticed every change. So did his mother. Victor stood alone near the edge of the reception, abandoned by the people who had laughed beside him earlier. The older man from the convoy leaned closer to Daniel. The board is waiting for your return, he said quietly. Thousands of workers still consider your family name a symbol of hope. Daniel remained silent for a moment. Then he looked at Amara. For years, I believed peace only existed far away from power, he admitted softly. But maybe peace depends on who stands beside you. Amara smiled faintly through the rain while thunder rolled across the hills behind them. As evening approached, many guests quietly left the wedding in embarrassment. The laughter from earlier had completely disappeared. Only silence and rain remained. Chief Adewale sat beside Daniel for the first time all day and spoke carefully. I judged you too quickly, he admitted. Daniel looked at the older man calmly. Most people did. Nearby, Victor watched the conversation with bitterness burning inside him. Humiliation twisted across his face as he realized the entire village now respected the man he tried to destroy. Before leaving, Victor approached Daniel one final time. You enjoyed this, didn't you? He asked bitterly. Daniel shook his head. No, but perhaps now you understand what it feels like to be measured unfairly. Victor said nothing after that. He simply turned and walked into the rain alone. Later that night, the convoy prepared to leave the village, but Daniel remained standing beneath the wedding tent beside Amara. The older man approached him again. Your father once believed this company would feed entire nations, he said softly. People are waiting for you. Daniel stared at the muddy road for a long moment. He remembered the greed, betrayal, and violence that had destroyed his family years earlier. Part of him still wanted to remain a simple farmer forever. Then Amara touched his hand gently. You ran from power because of pain, she whispered. But maybe you can use it differently. Daniel looked at her quietly, and for the first time since the SUVs arrived, a small smile appeared on his face. Then we will build something better than before, he said. Weeks later, the village had completely changed. The same people who once mocked Daniel now spoke about him with admiration. Roads near the farms were repaired, struggling families received work, and new equipment arrived for local farmers. But Daniel himself barely changed at all. He still woke before sunrise. He still walks the fields with muddy boots. One afternoon, Victor saw him working beside other farmers and approached carefully. Pride no longer existed in his voice. "Why help people who laughed at you?" he asked quietly. Daniel wiped dirt from his hands and looked across the fields. Because becoming cruel after suffering only spreads more suffering. Victor lowered his eyes in shame while Daniel returned calmly to work beside the people who once doubted him. Months passed, and Daniel's company slowly began rebuilding under his leadership. Unlike the powerful men before him, he refused to rule through fear. Workers were paid fairly, farmers received support, and entire communities started recovering. News of his success spread far beyond the village. One evening, Chief Adewale stood outside watching Daniel and Amara walk together through the fields at sunset. "You were right about him," he admitted quietly to his daughter. Amara smiled softly. "People saw poverty," she answered. "I saw character." In the distance, children ran through the farmland laughing while workers loaded harvest trucks beneath the fading orange sky. For the first time in many years, hope felt stronger than greed. One rainy afternoon, Daniel returned alone to the small church where he and Amara had married. The wooden benches were empty now, and silence filled the room. He stood near the altar remembering the laughter, the whispers, and the humiliation from that day. So much had changed in such a short time. The pastor slowly approached him with a gentle smile. "People speak your name differently now," the old man said. Daniel nodded faintly. "That is the problem with people," he replied quietly. "Respect that depends on money is not real respect." The pastor studied him for a moment before answering softly. "Maybe, but your story changed some hearts." Daniel looked towards the church doors, where sunlight finally pushed through the storm clouds outside. And for the first time, he truly believed the painful chapter of his life was over. A year after the wedding, the village gathered again beneath decorated tents. But this time the atmosphere was completely different. Farmers, workers, and families filled the celebration with genuine joy instead of gossip. Daniel arrived wearing the same simple smile he had carried long before the black SUVs ever appeared. As music played and children laughed nearby, Chief Adewale raised a glass before the crowd. "This village once judged a man by his clothes," he said heavily, "but character revealed the truth wealth could not hide." Silence settled briefly across the gathering while many remembered the shame of that wedding day. Daniel looked at Amara beside him and held her hand gently. In the end, the greatest thing he gained was never the company, the money, or the power that returned to him. It was finding the one person who loved him when he appeared to have nothing at all.